So we'll get kicked off with Steve, if you wouldn't mind starting us off with a bit about amphibious tenders, please.
Sure, my pleasure. So I think one of the things we wanted to go through is really to explain that amphibious vehicles have existed for a long time, almost more than 100 years. And most of them have really mainly been land vehicles. We've seen a lot of complex land vehicles, and I'm going to pull up a quick video here that is going to show a bit about it. So showing a car right now from the 70s, and there's been vehicles before that. And it's really funny because the amphibious capability has always been over land vehicles being able to stretch a piece of water, but they've almost always been street vehicles. And it's funny because it only started maybe 15, 20 years ago to really have interest in having boats that actually could be able to land, which is obviously is a different approach, because if we look at a car like the Amphi car, obviously you want to be on the street and eventually avoid traffic, or just have fun with friends and have a ride on the lake, which is funny, but it doesn't have a lot of purpose at the end, except if you really want to avoid traffic. But that means you need to have a boat ramp from point A to point B. And obviously those vehicles sometimes have shown, like the Sea Lions we see here, have shown amazing performance, but they've always been toys that could go fast, but didn't really have an everyday purpose. So it's interesting to see the evolution from different projects, cars that can get you really wet and drop in the water, need a boat ramp, to suddenly have a different approach to what an amphibious vehicle can be, if we can call it a vehicle, to a real boat. And then some might say, yeah, but why do I need a boat to go on the beach or on land? And where can I go to? And this new approach is really interesting because having the ability to make a proper boat with no compromise, that's got a beautiful ride, that keeps the guest really dry, and has the ability to be going on the beach, not to be exploring on the beach, but to have the ability to park on the beach, and also to have guests coming in and out of the boat in real safety. Because I think safety is really the key feature, and the purpose of this is, some people might say, well, why would I have an amphibious vehicle? What's the point? Where do you want me to drive? Can I go on the street? Well, no, that's not the point. The point is to be able to launch and retrieve in full security, and also without having the need for any infrastructure, which means that applies obviously for super yacht tenders, but we also have many owners that could potentially have a waterfront property and can't or don't want to be on the dock. And we can see that on the video we have right here, we have really safe and easy access. And maybe I'll let you talk here, Mark, because you've got lots of experience on this boat as an end user, and you can maybe tell us a bit about the factor of having the ability to get on and off, and what you think about the ladder, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, it was safety was paramount, and having a product that would make our guests feel confident in any conditions was a real bonus when they first tried it. And certainly the ladder mooring system, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, it looks a bit flimsy, but it's absolutely solid. And the guests are always very confident. They even have older members of the family, the mum and dads, when they've been on board, they're more than happy to use this. And the Iguana itself gives such a stable platform that there's never been any problem with that. That was one of the main points of trying to get them ashore, to do it safely.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's really the point of the amphibious tender, and then we'll see that later, but also to make it simple and efficient, and actually still keeping a good ride on the boat. Same thing, Mark, I'm sure you've got some points on the ride of the boat, and because I guess the amphibious side of it is maybe, what, 20% of the operations? So you still need a proper tender the rest of the time, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you've got that kind of a tender, it's a loss of tender. I mean, it would be crazy to have something that could just be used for going up and down beaches. It's now our sort of premier water sports tender for the kids doing wakeboarding and whatever else, just because it's got a lovely bit of deck space in there, so you've got room for toys. So it's just as much a guest transfer tender as it is for used for its amphibious capability.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's the main part of the why, what's the story of the Amphibious technology and how it has shifted from what we know of Amphibious, or the large vision of it, from having a boat that is actually in a certain way a super beacher, and it's not meant to be a land vehicle. So I think that's about it for the first presentation. You can see here the guests come in and out of the boat, very safe, easy. There isn't many waves on this video, so any tender can go on that beach, but you can have lots more waves and you're still stable, and you don't need many crew members to do that either. So you can go out and have only one crew member and drop guests if you need to.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. It's been a good introduction of amphibious boats and some key points from Mark, who's an end user of one of Iguana's boats. I'm going to ask Richard Booth now from Superyacht Tenders and Toys to just run over a few details of sort of beach landing with tenders and what sort of other options there are available to the clients and guests. Richard?
Sure. It's a growing trend, beach landing, and it's something we're seeing an awful lot of. Every request pretty much that comes through the company asks for some form of beach landing. And it's one thing to say you can do it, but there's various different compromises and things that affect beach landing that we've found that we have to advise on. So there's lots of different types of beach landing, aside from the amphibious, that is. We've got these small ribs that have, you can put the bow steps on. We see a lot of those now. You have removable ladders, just a really simple ladder over the bow. They can be used. And we're seeing a lot more hydraulic and electric bow doors, so you can go bow up to the beach and get guests on and off. As you can see from the video that's playing now, they do have their downsides. You can't always get right up to the beach, depending on the type of beach you're going to, and the guests have to get their feet wet. And it's in no swell at all, as you can see. It's not a problem. But imagine if there was a bit of a swell running there, you're going to have several crew members, and that could be quite a precarious thing to do. So they have their limitations. And like I said, they're very dependent on the conditions, and it's not always going to be flat, calm waters as shown here. This is somewhere where the Iguana really comes into its own, and as you can see, long beaches, steep beaches, sand. You can see it can drive up onto the beach, and guests are safe, are dry, and this is a big bonus. And it's, no matter if there's some swell running, you are going in with the swell, and then you're turning around and going out with the swell. This is also something that you don't ever find yourself broadsided by the waves, which is something that can happen when you're doing the bows to beach landing the standard way. And I've heard some horror stories about it, and there'll be some videos later on which show what can happen when you're doing this sort of beach landing. You can quite easily get yourself in trouble, and the bigger these tenders get, we're doing a lot of 10, 12, 14 meter beach landers and bigger. And the idea of those going up to the beach in some swell and getting it wrong, we've had 10 meter tenders, stories of them that have gone over and they've been written off. Quite simply, it's a very dangerous thing to do, and it can sometimes get underestimated. So the Iguana kind of solves those problems really and gets around it, which is very impressive. And like Steve was saying, it's a different approach, and it really does work. It's a very versatile platform. But yeah, beach landers in general, they're very, very common. Everyone wants one, and like I say, they also want that beach lander to do various other things: the water sports, the guest transfer, doing the beach runs. There's always compromises with a smaller boat, whereas the Iguana we've found gives a big platform, and it works well in all those scenarios. There seems to be very little compromises made, which is really good to see. There were some other things I wanted to touch on with the boat that Steve and I were talking about. You park this boat on the beach and you're set up for the day, which is what everyone wants to do. The tender can stay there on the beach, and with some models, you've got the advantage of having a base. You've got the shade. You've got toilet facilities. All these are big pluses.
Freshwater shower.
Freshwater shower. It's all there on the beach. And if the weather changes, it doesn't matter. You can still stay there, knowing that tender can get you off the beach, and the crew can sort out all the gear afterwards. So there's so many advantages to this platform. I'm personally very, very impressed with it. So I suppose the next sort of part of it I touched on was the safety side of things, and it's something I get asked a lot: is the safety of beach landing, and is this boat capable? There's some boats, there's the smaller boats. You can take a small Zodiac onto some pretty rough beaches. It's dangerous, but with the right crew, you can do it. But the bigger the boats get, you can beach land, but you've got to prepare for it, and you need a lot of hands, and you need to be very careful. And this tender the Iguana does get you around a lot of those problems. And we're confident, to say that it's a safe practice, safe way of doing it. And yeah, it's a very. I think Paul, you're going to talk about the safety aspects of it next.
Yeah, I covered a lot of them already. So
sorry about that.
All right, I'll go home. No, that's all right. No, thank you, Richard. Some really good sort of first-hand experience from what yachts and guests and owners are asking for, and what's getting more and more popular in the industry. So just on the topic of safety, start of a little video here, which Richard was talking about what happens when it goes wrong. When it goes wrong, it can go wrong very badly, and the last thing you want to do is end up with that being a boat full of crew and guests. And the primary focus on board yachts, whether it's tender operations or anything else, for the captain and the crew, is safety of the crew and the guests. And being able to deliver a platform and experience to your guests is obviously right up there with the important factors. So being able to get to beaches in these kind of conditions with even some of your slightly more inexperienced tender drivers on a platform like the Iguana, you can get there safely, straight in and up onto the beach. Hours of rest and crew fatigue is something I experienced when I was on board quite a lot. It was just sort of coming into force. And we would often find ourselves, if we had to get guests ashore, we'd have to send our more experienced tender drivers or officers all the time, especially if we were trying to undertake a tricky landing, which meant they were up and around and working rather than getting their rest, or they'd have to get their rest at other times. If you've got a purpose-built amphibious tender, then the Iguana platform is incredibly simple to operate and easy to operate for with just a little bit of training, which is something that we would spend a day or so on board with the crew. And then that means that all of your crew will be able to safely drop off your guests at the beach, regardless of the bad weather the swell. We've all been there, Saint-Tropez Beach at 2:00 in the afternoon, where you've got a mixture of wind and 5 hours worth of boat chop, and you try and drop guests off at the end of a rickety pontoon so they can go and have their late lunch. You got 2 crew in the boat and a helmsman, and guests trying to precariously sort of get off in their in their nice clothes.
You've done that, Mark, haven't you, with your boat?
Say again.
You've been to Saint-Tropez with your Iguana, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to sort of preempt it and go and see the right people at the right time to make sure they're financially looked after, because otherwise they're losing out all their tender tips. But yeah, absolutely, we use it all season.
But it's make it a lot easier than having to tie up on the end of those wooden pontoons and beam onto some boat chop. Mark also touched on some of the sort of elderly guests you might have. Elderly guests, kids, they might not be quite as limber or nimble as some of the other guests. So getting them ashore, if you can get your platform right up onto the beach, then they can walk down a ladder. That's going to be a lot safer, a lot less stress for the captain's crew and the guests. And why you wouldn't pick that option, then I'm not quite sure. I wouldn't mind going back 10 years, going on boats and having that facility. Would be quite handy. So that's pretty much covered the safety, both covered by Richard, myself, and Mark even.
If any of the attendees have questions, so you just type them on the text on the side, and we'll be more than happy to take care of them.
Thank you for popping that in. I was meant to say that at the beginning.
That's fine.
All right. Mark, we touched on sort of guest setup and beach setups, and I know it's something that you do sort of firsthand with your crew and for your guests. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about how you do that with an amphibious tender as opposed to a regular tender?
Yeah, indeed. Our modus operandi, we don't do huge beach setups, but when we do, it's always a real sort of bane of the deck crew's life, just because the amount of people, the amount of resources it sucks in. Generally, if you've got any kind of a swell running, you've got at least 3 crew in the tender, which you touched upon earlier, maybe more. If you've got, I'd say, any kind of swell running, you're running the risk of going broadsided on the beach and stranding the tender. And it's always a real pain. I was introduced to Iguana by basically the same sort of thing that Richard was saying. The owner saying, well, is there a better way of doing this? And we came across the Iguana tender, and Steve just happened to be in the bay when we had the guests on board. And for the first time, up until then, we've been using a small Zodiac and big swells, which meant that the guests would often get wet. It was always often fairly treacherous. And again, it took a lot of crew to do it. But then they got on the Iguana and straight away said, we want one of these. And since then, it's just revolutionised our operations in that you can load up so much kit on there because there's a nice big open deck area. You can then just run everything straight ashore. You can generally do it in 1 or 2 trips rather than 6 or 7. And then just end up with a great beach setup and just use it as a platform and get the guests on the tender very safely to shore thereafter. It's been a brilliant platform. We thought it was. The boss thought, I'm not going to use it in the Caribbean. That's the main reason he bought it, was just for one beach that he goes to every year. Whereas beforehand, any kind of swell running, you'd have to take a limo tender, about 30 to 40 minutes up the coast. Then we'd have to get a vehicle to bring them all the way back along the beach to a restaurant which was about 200 meters from the boat. Having the Iguana means we can do it in pretty much any conditions. And it says revolutionised the way we work. We worked with a very good friend of the boss. We lent them the boat and a driver for 2 weeks, and these guys are full on busy. I mean, they're doing 2 beach setups a day in, day out for months on end, and they were just blown away by it. They just because they could get everything safely to shore, it didn't suck in the crew members. As Paul touched upon, the hours of work and rest are a nightmare if you have that kind of a busy itinerary, because you're constantly the crew working 16, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, and eventually that takes its toll. But as I say, they borrowed our boat, and they couldn't believe how much simpler it made life. Let's say it cut it down from a 3 or 4 hour setup to maybe an hour and a half. So it's just say it's a brilliant platform. I can't sing its praises more highly. I know it sounds like I'm a salesman rather than an operator, but I can guarantee you that's not the case. The boss has said it's the best boat he's ever bought, and he's quite an experienced yacht owner. So as I say, it's a magnificent bit of kit.
Mark, you were saying before, obviously the images we've got shown on the video obviously show flat, calm conditions. Anyone can do anything in those conditions. But yeah, it sounds like when things start getting a little bit choppy is when it really comes into its own.
I can probably count on one hand the amount of times in the season you get conditions like that. It's not like that. You're in the Caribbean, the swells wrap round, the boss wants to go to a different beach. You've generally got at least half a metre of swell. I've been beached on the Iguana with a metre and a half, and it's still it's smooth and it's perfectly manageable.
I think we've got a video of that coming up a little bit later on.
Yeah, with the red boat. But as I say, it just makes everything manageable. These aren't the kind of people that like to hear no. So to have the option to say, yeah, we can do that 99% of the time is a fantastic bonus for me.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Mark. That's really quite sort of nailed the beach setup side of things, which are incredibly popular. And yeah, like you said, we never like to say no unless safety is the limiting factor. But if we can do it more often in half the time, then it's got to be a bonus.
Okay, we've got George T that is asking if we can play the last video because he knows the landing of the Iguana. So maybe we can replay the landing part.
Yep, on the. You doing it, Steve?
Sure.
Just while that's playing, just a point that Richard brought up was that people are asking for beaching tenders, and it was only I was doing the same, and it was only somebody who introduced me to the Iguana. Before that, I'd seen the other boats, and I'd actually operated one or two of them, and more often than not, there was always compromise. And it was always going to be, oh well, it's okay until these conditions, or it's all right up until this point. Whereas the Iguana does actually offer you the capability to do pretty much everything you need to do in pretty much most conditions.
I think it's the Steve. I think it's the limitations video that you're going to be playing all the way through.
Okay.
So there will be an opportunity to see that video again. It's going to be pre-played straight through. I presume you mean the one with the police boat broadside getting flipped over. Here we go.
Okay, so it's the end of it, you mean?
Yeah, it's only a minute long.
Waves?
It's only a minute long, so play it straight through. There we go.
There we go. Okay, is that the one, George? There we go, so we can see you. Yeah, so this one is actually landing. So that the type of question we get asked. Sorry, I'll just go back on there. Is sometimes I get asked the question: does the boat slam when it lands, and how strong it is? But you can see it doesn't slam because the wave is in the back, and the boat gets out just at the same time as the wave comes in. So there's no slamming ever coming out of the water.
So, Steve, do you want to just very quickly explain when you deploy the landing gear in those kind of situations and how it works?
Absolutely. So the boat operates very much like an airplane. So you want to deploy the landing gear as early as you can. The boat rides very well with the landing gear down. It actually runs up to 15 miles an hour if needed. So if you need to get away from the wave, it's powerful enough, even with the landing gear down. So you deploy the landing gear early and head to the beach, and you just touch ground whenever you touch ground. And you have the tracks turning before you touch ground. So it's pretty seamless, and it's pretty easy to operate. Again, I guess, Mark, you guys have got it really quickly, haven't you, from your first experience to really have it?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's as Paul said earlier. It really is. It doesn't take a genius to drive it. You generally have one person on the helm, one person on the tracks, and it is as simple. I mean, you still keep an eye on the waves, and you want to get it right and just ride in on the back of the previous wave. But it's fine. You get the tracks running, and as soon as it touches bottom, you're safe.
Yeah. And then we get another question from Alfred. He says, "How critical is the center of gravity?" So we'll show that, and probably in the next. We're going to cover that topic a little bit further out in the webinar. So we'll answer to that question in a few minutes.
Yeah, there's a pretty good video of that, isn't there, coming up?
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Richard, you touched on sort of guest sort of expectations a little bit earlier on. Is there you'd like to sort of elaborate a little bit on what's sort of been asking for from a supplier point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. There's basically we found owners and guests, charter guests. They would want to go to far out places, unique places. It's our understanding they want to go off the beaten track and find their own adventures. One thing they don't like hearing, which I think Mark said, and I'm sure we've all experienced, is they don't like hearing the word no. You can't do that, and it has to happen sometimes, obviously for safety. But if they've purchased something, a Beachlander tender, for example, and they get told they can't go to the beach they want to go to, it doesn't go down too well. And with the increasing amount of setups that we're getting asked for and the complexities of it, to have a platform that you can take to the beach in the morning, get all set up, you can say yes to the guests and not have to worry too much about the changes throughout the day or the wind and the swell picking up, is a massive bonus. To give you an idea, I was going to just run through some of the things we get asked for the beach setups. Mark, you'll have several items on this list, I'm sure, and have experienced it. But we're getting big barbecue grill setups, Bedouin tents. These are all things that we've obviously supplied and we offer, and
have to get and taken ashore.
And they all have to get taken ashore. There's beach lounges, whether they're teak ones or inflatables, they're still big pieces of kit. Lighting, cool bags, beach games. The setup just goes on. And if you're going to have lunch on the beach, you've got to get all of the catering there. And on top of that, you've got the toys, which is you've got paddle boards, even the sea bobs you can play with off the beach. With the kite surfing gear, kayaks, the bikes if they want to go off on their mountain bikes or electric bikes. All this stuff takes hours and lots of crew resources to set up, and to try and ease the pressure on the crew to make that, that then improves the guests' experience. Having a platform like the Iguana is highly beneficial. It's like you say, making it easier for the crew makes it better for the guests, and having that amphibious capability is something to talk about as well. It's another USP for charters. You could say that you can offer something that someone else can't, and all this makes a difference to the expectations. So there are some massive advantages, and not to mention that the way you arrive on the beach is something that you don't see every day. And there's certainly you're going to get some looks if you're somewhere public, but even being on board, I'm sure it's a very stylish and very elegant way of arriving at a beach, and there's no mad panic, rushing around, quickly getting people on and off. You can just take your time, get off leisurely, and that's a very nice thing to be able to offer an owner and their guests.
Excellent.
Yeah. Is that something you see as well, Mark?
With what?
Do you feel guests are happy to come on the beach and in style?
It's absolutely. It's if you're going to spend your time around public places and you don't want to be seen, I wouldn't recommend it. To be absolutely honest with you, because it is such a wow factor. I mean, people are used to seeing us now. We've been operating it for 3 years now, and yet every time we rock up at the beach, wherever that might be, camera phones are out. They're taking pictures of the guests, and it is still a wow factor. I still get a kick out of seeing going ashore, particularly in challenging situations when you've got all the other boats around. Like they've got to go a kilometre or two up the beach just to find somewhere decent to land. And we think, oh yeah, that's right. We go, and it always draws a crowd. As I say, if you're a very private person who doesn't like to be seen, you might want to look at something else. But because it is such a great bit of kit.
Another thing I like is when you come up the beach and there's a bit of swell and people see you coming in and they go like, oh, we're going to video that. This is going to go really wrong. You know, and they're waiting for it to go wrong. And then they see the boat coming out of the water and they go like, what the hell, you know, and everything goes well.
It's happened time and
really
again
funny
when they don't realise that it's an amphibious vehicle. And you have people at the beach guys going, whoa, whoa, whoa. And just the tender driver just smiling, yeah, all right, blah, 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 and off you go.
Yeah. And I think that's something that is really well made on the Iguanas, that from outside, you can hardly see that it's actually amphibious.
Absolutely. With the owner, when he first got it, he just wasn't used to it, but now he loves it when his friends are on the beach. He'll just ask for the music to be cranked right up, and he'll come in, way, and he wants to be seen because he's so proud of the boat, and he knows that it's going to go well, and he can arrive in style.
Oh, that's great.
Well, that probably obviously there's an awful lot of good parts to it. Steve's going to run through a couple of the limitations. There aren't many, and they're quite extreme. But he's going to cover and show that video operating all the way through, and cover that centre of gravity question that was kindly posed by one of our watchers.
Exactly, and it's an interesting question because we get it very often, and people feel concerned by seeing the boat from the side that the center of gravity is actually maybe not well balanced, or is concerned, can we put a lot of guests in the front of the boat, for example? And the thing is, well, the fiberglass boat, it's actually a carbon fiber boat, is very light, and the center of gravity is super well balanced in the middle of the boat and in front of the landing gear. So there's no real concern about the center of gravity. So we've pulled up this video that we've already seen with a boat that gets caught in terms of limitation. You can see this boat can get caught in the wave and eventually capsize. And usually with a boat, you would think that the closer you're going to get to the beach, the worse it's going to get. And on a boat, a beach is certainly not a shelter when it's got waves on it. The Iguana is a bit the opposite, because with the landing gear, if you start to get thrown on the beach, as soon as your landing gear is going to dry up on the beach, you're safe. You might get wet, but you're not in danger because you're landed, and you can extract yourself out. So that's really interesting in terms of limitation. And this is the kind of situation you would not see with the Iguana, because as soon as it gets thrown to the beach, as we can see here, it's already on land, so the water flows under. And so there are limitations to the size of the waves. There's not much risk coming with the waves, and one of the main risks is to get wet, or to get the guest wet. But if the driver drives really well, you can go in 6 feet waves and go seamlessly, and the guest would not even know that you got waves. In terms of balance, this video is interesting because it really shows the limit of the angle and how steep it could go. It also could go aside. I'm afraid we don't have a video, but you can also go aside. And you'll see on a video like this that when it comes down, the boat actually finds its balance and just follows the Terran. So people are not going to say we are wearing a tie, but this happens to be a video that was shot on the Thames during the Henley Regatta, which is one of the royal family's rowing regatta. In terms of Terrans, a lot of people ask, is it limited to a soft beach or a shallow beach? And the main question usually comes because a lot of amphibious vehicles have been vehicles with wheels, and the wheels having a very strong ground pressure, not spread a lot, usually struggle to go in soft terrains or in harder terrains. Where on a boat like the Iguana, the Caterpillars, you've all seen mini diggers go in crazy situations. So this video, you can see, for example, this boat is actually being stored every day on that platform there, and that's where it lives. It suffers, but it survives. And of course, there are limits, so you don't want to do the same as this guy. This would be by far the end limit that you don't even want to try. That was just to a blink of an eye. And then there's harder beaches. I think, Mark, we discussed that earlier. So this one is really a tough beach because it's not tidal. It's very pibbly. It's really shingle. And you've got the backwash that makes it a straight wall. I don't know if the connection's good or not. On my side, it's not great, but you can see the boat easily coming out of the water, even with the brake, and the brake doesn't challenge the machine at all. It does rip a little bit because it's pibbly, but it does the job, and it's quite amazing in this type of situation. I did, I think, one of the hardest terrain I've been on, and many of you probably have been there, is in Nice. If you go in front of the hotels on Nice Beach, it's really big pebbles, very slippery, very straightforward. And I didn't think it was possible to get out there. And we had a guest that asked us to go and pick him up there, and we actually made it on those big, slippery, straight pebbles. So it tells you a lot. And then one of the great things about it is that you can get a lot of guests on board and keep the center of gravity very easily. We don't have a picture, but we've tried. What was it? How many people did we put in front of the boat at the factory last time, Paul?
Yeah, we had 11 of the factory chaps standing forward of the console, evenly spread forward of the console, and it was
that was just about, wasn't it?
Yeah, just before it started to very slowly dip at the bow. But yeah, I was surprised by 11.
Yeah, so 11 big guys in the front of the boat, and it was still balanced. So that shows a lot about possible limitations. Of course, there are limitations, and there will always be, and you've got to drive carefully, like any vehicle. But it goes very, very far to the capabilities. Another great pictures I wanted to show is probably the next one. Sorry. So you can see on this picture that you don't need a lot of terrain to actually being able to pick up or drop off people or just park. So even if the beach is super narrow, you can always turn around on the landing gear and have the platform over the beach, leave the landing gear in the water, and the boat wouldn't go anywhere. So obviously on this video, it's completely flat. It's a lake, so you would be able to go there with most of the boats. But you can imagine the same situation with waves, and the waves would flow under the boat, and with a very, very narrow beach, you're still able to get there. So that's also an interesting. And then finally, a bit of what we talked previously. The boat is super seaworthy because you have a 31 feet boat, which is 9.2 meters, that you can actually go on the beach with, which means even if you have some serious swell, like we can see on this video that is posed, you can still get in and out. And if you're at sea, you get the performance and the capacity of a proper boat, which means you're not limited to a small Zodiac or a smaller limited type of boat.
Steve, we just had a question come in.
Yep.
Michael just said he's just seen the photo showing the landing gear with the build up under the tracks. How do we keep that build up from collecting, and does it cause the track to come off? I'm not sure which photo that was, but either yes, sand or sort of shingle build up. Would you mind answering that for us, Steve?
Sure. So the sprocket that drives, so that's probably what you're talking about, Michael. The sprocket that potentially that drives the track and potentially could be full of sand or mud or those kinds of things, which is typical on a Caterpillar machine. On this one, it's actually open. So any sand that goes in it, as soon as the teeth of the track comes, it pushes everything out. It's not blocked. And then to the other question is, do we avoid having the track to come off? Compared to many Caterpillar machines, they have a grease pump that is used to increase the tension on the track or decrease the tension on the track. On the Iguana, we have a dynamic tensioning system, which is a ram that is directly connected to the hydraulic pump and to the main computer. And that ram actually dynamically tensions the tension on the track on 2 milliseconds. So we always keep the full pressure on the track to avoid popping a track off. It's very, very unlikely someone's going to pop off a track, except it's turning really sharply on, for example, the rocks we've seen previously, which are very sharp rocks. So when you go on those type of rocks, you want to be careful when you probably don't want to spin 360 on the dime to avoid that. But on average, we've had very little tracks pop off since we started. We had a few, but it's never been a lot.
Thank you, Steve. And Michael, if you are still listening, what we can do, we can, if that hasn't answered your question, send you a photo of how a close-up of the sprocket showing how they are effectively built like a skeleton. So it's all open and the water and everything else, all the sand and everything washes straight through rather than building up inside little pockets. So we'll get a photo sent out to you to properly answer that for you. Okay?
Yeah. And Michael, if you go on YouTube and you type how to change a track on an Iguana, you would get a good picture of how it's made. Or you pop it out, and really all the equipment that goes around it. Really nice video to see.
Well, that actually runs straight perfectly back into my final section of about maintenance. Obviously, Steve just touched on any maintenance you need to do for the Caterpillar tracks. Should you need to take one off or pop one back on again. There are videos on YouTube, and we have access to other videos. Should you have any other maintenance you need some assistance with. But from a yacht point of view, and Mark will probably back me up here, as soon as an engineer sees a new toy or system he's never seen before that comes across as being complicated from an initial look, that seems to be their primary concern. It's going to take up all of their time, either just keeping it running or fixing it. Is that something you've come across before, Mark?
Yeah, pretty much every time. There's always a wince when you tell them they're going to get a new bit of kit. With the Iguana, we actually sent our chief engineer up to Iguana to have a look at it and to spend a day or so with the guys. So they had, whilst it was in build, so they had a real good idea of what went on sort of below decks and what was going on with the tender way before it came on board. And at the end of the day, it's very simple. It's it's a complex boat, but the actual mechanics of it are very simple, and we've had very few problems with it. Excellent.
Well, that's exactly it, really. So the actual Iguana was built and without over-engineering it. As soon as you start over-engineering, you start getting problems, and the whole system becomes problematic. And it's all kind of stemmed from the setup of the company, the conception by the owner, who he wanted a boat for him and his family, and he wanted to be able to maintain it himself. He didn't have an engineer. He kept it at his house, and he didn't want endless maintenance trying to keep this family boat operational. So the system that has been designed and is currently running, as Mark said, with very few sort of ongoing problems, it's an incredibly simple and a very reliable system that's been tried and tested. I think the the tracks and some of the gear and the suspension we're on generation number 3. And there's been some very minor tweaks between generations along the way. And the idea is that any maintenance that needs to be done is basically able to be done without specialist tools. we don't use specialist tools to install. All the hydraulic hoses are standard hoses, standard fittings. They're all kept in stock, spares in stock, should you ever need to replace them. And those kind of hoses, those are the main part of maintenance and routine maintenance. We recommend our clients change those hoses every couple of years, purely as routine preventative maintenance, which any tender on a yacht should have their preventative maintenance platform schedule written down, up and running, and most engineers will keep it ticked off with their monthly checks.
Yeah, and I would say another thing is that there is an app that comes with the phone, with the boat, that works on the phone, that allow for remote diagnosis, and I think that's also a great thing.
One thing to mention with that app is the location of the boat is private, so we cannot tell where the boat is. Obviously, the privacy of yacht guests and our clients are paramount. So when we can log into with the client's permission, log into the boat for diagnostics, but we do never find out where the actual boat is. The clients have to tell us that over the phone.
Or don't.
They
don't want to.
Of course. And then all the parts we use, they're all fit for purpose, as you'd expect. If you decide to go for the electric drive, then the motors, all the electrics, are resin sealed and have been taken straight from submarines. So we haven't compromised on the equipment we use. So whilst keeping it specialist, it's also easy to maintain and very reliable. And
Mark, you've got the electric drive, do you?
Say again?
On your boat, you've got the electric drive, do you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So yeah, even fewer things to maintain, fewer hoses, hydraulic hoses, and the lack of an inboard engine to drive the hydraulics. So to finish off with, just checking to see if we've got any other questions. Mark, you've covered most of it, but we'll just touch on it. Just round up and finish things off just with some of the key values of having the Iguana in a super yacht operations.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on I was very much driven by the wants of the owner. And for years, they've been looking for a tender to be able to do something competently. And there was never anything on the market. I first saw the Iguana at a boat show. I just thought, oh, yeah, another gimmick. And Steve would tell you, he picked me up and we went for a little sea trial in St. Martin. Again, 1.5 meter swell on the beach. I thought, oh, and as we were approaching the beach, I've done quite a few beach landings, and I was going, and it just glided out to the beach. I wouldn't have put my name to it and then risked giving the owner the opportunity to try the boat if I didn't believe in its capabilities, because it's just not worth my worth sort of losing face with the owner. And if an owner is looking for a boat that can do everything and get them to the beach in style and in comfort, in safety, and it means that Madame can wear her posh frocks and still go to these lovely restaurants without the fear of sort of turning up with a soggy bum, then this is the boat for it. As I say, I've seen lots of different tenders advertising as doing it, and they'll always show the adverts in these beautiful, pristine waters with no onshore break. You go, oh, look what we can do for you. And yet, as soon as you throw the dynamics of a shore break with a meter and a half, it goes out the window with the best will in the world and a well-trained crew and kedge anchors and all this sort of stuff going on. It just isn't going to work. So as I say, that is really for me the key value is to be able to get the owner what they want when they want it, and doing it very well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark.
Pleasure.
We have another question here.
Okay.
Can we give it a try at the boat show, Alfred? Yes, absolutely. We shall be in Cannes Boat Show, and it will be available for sea trial. Hopefully, if Cannes Boat Show is held. If not, if it's delayed, we're targeting Monaco Boat Show as well. So yeah, definitely. And depending on where you are in the world, more than happy to see if we can arrange for a sea trial, maybe closer to that.
Excellent. Well, what we'll do, everyone who's registered and come along and listened, we'll follow up and just say a quick thank you email, which you can reply to if you want to schedule a sea trial or if you've got any further questions. Thank you everyone for their questions. Carrie, you also said great photos, really showing the benefits of a beach setup, very powerful. It's not a question, but definitely deserve the credit for pitching in. Thank you very much. Thank you to my panel. Thank you, Richard, for your experiences from Superyacht Attendants and Toys, and Mark from Motor Yacht Yala, who has been operating an amphibious boat for a good few years. Has anyone got any final little bits and pieces?
I think we're good. If we have outside questions, just eventually anyone out there, just send us a message if you feel that the webinar is useful, and if you think that we should do another one, maybe on another topic, we'll be more than happy to do that as well.
Excellent. All right, thank you very much. Enjoy your afternoon, everyone, and stay safe in these crazy times.
Thank you very much. All the best to everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.